Connecticut, 95, traffic. I did all of it. You guys don't care, though. You don't want to hear about traffic. You're here to have fun. You're here to have a good time. You're here to have fun with our guest who's coming on very shortly, the great Dan Ryckert. But as always, we are like that close. Maybe during the show we hit the number 1,000 subscribers. You know what that means? It unlocks some new content for you guys. Maybe Dan will be involved in that. We'll talk to him about it on the show. Want to do that all-encompassing draft. Want to bring that war room idea, which you'll hear way more about when Dan joins us. But make sure you subscribe right there. It's right under Todd at thewrestlingmatshow.com. Please do that right now. Turn on the notifications. Hit that bell. A lot going on there. Not only the past shows, you can catch all 10 of the past live episodes. You could absolutely do that. You could check out our shorts. You could check out the segments that are broken down. We had a great interview with our first Wrestling Mat guest, Joey Janela, last week, who won the GCW title for like 8 seconds, and then that dastardly Matt Cardona brought in Mance Warner to take it away from him. You might hear from Matt Cardona very soon on this very show. Now, we're going to get into a lot going on in WWE. Obviously, Raw tonight. We'll talk about AJ Styles and pulling the Mark Henry. Yes, that's right, Rob. Right under Todd. Hashtag right under Todd. That's all you have to remember. Now pull that away so I can point to it again. TheWrestlingMatchShow.com. It is indeed right under Todd and right next to the great Drake Maverick. And under Danhausen and Okada Bucks and all that stuff. Anyway, let's get into it. Thank you guys for being in the chat. Thanks for getting the questions in already. The comments. I know you guys have been waiting. We'll talk AJ and Cody. We will talk Swerve and Roddy and how we got there, all coming up a little bit ahead of Raw tonight. But without further ado, he's waited long enough. So have you. Let's bring in our special guest. I worked with him for, 3 years. He'll answer that in a second. Multiple years. He is the creative director of Giant Bomb. He got married at a Taco Bell. He is a master of pranks. And he figured out how to use Twitch better than most people did, including the multi-billion-dollar company that we both used to work for. Without further ado, bring him in, Dan Ryckert. Welcome to the Wrestling Mat.
Man, all that on my resume, but I have not won the GCW title, so I might be one step below your previous guest.
But I wouldn't rule it out, though. I wouldn't rule it out. How are you with Cardona? Are you good? Are you good with Cardona?
Cardona, I talked to at a WrestleCon once, and I went to a party at Cody Rhodes' house once and talked to him there briefly, and that's about it, I think.
And we're off and running. Dan drops. I was at Cody Rhodes' house before.
During the end of the Stardust era, I was in a Clash of Clans clan with him, so very serious stuff. Yes,
The Nikki clan, is that correct?
It was the Nikki clan. Wow, you know everything.
I don't know anything about that stuff. I just know you were in that because I remember the pictures, and that stuff sticks with me more than important stuff in my life. I remember stuff like that. But your life in professional wrestling brought you to WWE when you were doing other things. So I'll ask this first. Where does your fandom begin?
Late 1993, flipping through channels, seeing Razor and Shawn, and I don't think I'd ever seen wrestling or even knew anything about what it is or whether, people ask, when did you realize it was fake? When did you realize whatever? And I don't think I ever even thought of it like that. I just was drawn to Razor and Shawn, and I thought, Shawn seemed like quite an a-hole, and Razor seemed like a real cool dude. And I was like, well, I need to figure out how to watch more of this all the time and make it a giant part of my life. And I did for 30 plus years or whatever. So, yeah.
Starting out in the chat, Captain Wiener, what's up? What's up, Phil? What's up, Ian, who Dan and I both know? Great Stambino. The Kaiju Lounge, another former co-worker of ours. What's up to him as well? Hello, Noah. Good to have you here. We all love the same person equally. But let's move on from that, Dan. You were involved in the video game industry for quite some time. Now, I don't know if you know this story. I might have told you this. When the job you got, which was, what was the official title at WWE?
When I came on, it was senior producer, I believe.
Of podcasts, or was it just the general?
It might have just been senior producer, but
Sounds
I was
right.
Pigeonholed into podcasts. Yeah, that was the focus.
When I heard about that job, we had internal referrals. That was a thing. You and I did not know each other. I knew of your name. I recommended someone else for the gig. I'm not going to say his name so he doesn't get heat.
Is this my predecessor?
Nope.
Okay.
No, it's somebody you worked with after that. Our mutual friend.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
One of my other favorite people that I worked with there.
Yes, a great person. But once again, don't want to get him heat. I'm sure he's watching. Yep. So I recommended him for the job, and I got told, they filled it already. Woods got somebody in. I was like, son of a bitch, that Woods. And then he's like, and then I found out it was you, and I was like, oh, okay. And then there was another job that popped up, and another person got that. By the way, I never got my $1,000 from WWE.
Wait a minute.
For that? Go ahead.
I technically hired the person that you referred later.
Did you get it?
Yeah. Well, no. I hired him. I was like, I think I was technically the hiring manager on that.
Oh, sure. But it's in there. If you go back in my
count, like if he got
I
turned
asked
down once,
like he got turned down. Okay, because you got the job, and then after that, I heard, hey, there's this other gig, and I was like, he'd be perfect for that. And I was like, hey man, stick with it. And I saw like you could. The work day, the workflow thing that everybody probably has their own job in some way, shape, or form. Like it's in there. And I remember asking about it, and I never got it. So they owe me $1,000.
You got some back pay coming. Just call some people up over there.
Sure, I'm sure I'll get that real soon.
Anyway, it's a new regime. Who knows?
Not from that one. They ain't paying me that money. I guarantee that.
All right.
They got people there who couldn't tie their shoe if you spotted the loop in the swoop. Okay, that's all I'm saying about that. And if you get it, you get it. Let's get into your time there, though, because when did you start? What's your...
early January 2020. So 2.5 months before everything shut down.
Okay, so is that when we started the Twitch conversation, or was it a year later?
No, that was during the pandemic. That would have been, I want to say that was
end of the year.
That might have been late 2021.
It was late. No, it would have been late 2020, I think. It was late 2020. Okay. Because remember, a lot of those people then disappeared that we had those conversations with.
Yes, a lot of people we worked with.
The next year.
Well, I was working on a show with Cole, Gargano, Dakota, and Stokely, and all of them were gone fairly quickly after that pilot. That's around the time that I piloted that show. It went very well. Everyone that heard it loved it. And the notes I got back from the company were like, yeah, we like the idea of doing something where we do a rewatch of Attitude Era stuff, but why not maybe not these NXT guys as hosts. Let's get Jerry Lawler to host it. And I was like, I don't think you understand the podcast audience or why I picked these four. Turns out a genuine rapport and friendship and passion is a very important thing of casting a podcast. You can't produce that. And I don't know if you know this, but WWE was a company that liked to overproduce things.
No, they didn't. Get out of here. So I believe, as I think about that, and I do want to talk about that too, because I saw it. Someone sent it to me, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. Shocker. Not that show. A different show.
That's Greg Miller's show.
That's Greg, right.
Yeah.
I saw that, and I was like, this is fun. This will work out well. Doesn't happen. But the Twitch... So you started January 2020, which is an interesting time in the company. And I've spoken about that a lot recently. Good. We could talk about that podcast we were talking about that I did in that month. I texted you about this yesterday. Okay.
The one that got some heat, yes.
Let's jump right into it. Jump right into it. Welcome, everybody. Subscribe at thewrestlingmatchshow.com. Dan Ryckert is here, 971 and going up. Let's get there. So let's start where you start. We'll try to go in chronological order, and everybody who watches me knows I go off in tangents, and we get good content out of that. January 2020, what was the first thing that you were given or told that you were going to do?
That was around the time where we were going to be traveling frequently, and we were going to record in person, at least for New Day. There were going to be times where New Day was coming in, and we were going to record in Stamford, like knock out several recordings in one day. Then there were going to be times where it's like, okay, we're going to fly to Arizona and knock out a bunch of Corey Graves' show, knock out a bunch of New Day's show. So I was on the road for like 2 months, recording in person with Cena in Boston, going to Arizona, going to house shows in Pennsylvania. So a couple months of actually like being on the road, which was the thing I really looked forward to, because I was at 14 years old trying to laminate and print fake press passes to sneak backstage as a mark during the Attitude Era. I was pretending to be Shawn Michaels' cousin trying to get backstage. So it's like I played the long game where it's like, all right, let me just get old enough. Let me get my career in a point where I can just work there, and then I'll be backstage and can work on stuff. And so that was the thing. I always wanted to be part of the circus. I wanted to see the show and see how the sausage was made. And so I had that for a couple of months. And then obviously everything shut down.
So let's go back to January 2020. I think, did I tell us? No, I talked to you about this. So Corey's a couple months into After the Bell at that point, maybe?
They had done it for a few months prior to me, because I remember when I found out on Thanksgiving Day 2019 that I got the job. So I remember those holiday breaks spending like, okay, I need to catch up on everything. I want to go into this. And because honestly, I didn't listen prior to that. I listened to other wrestling podcasts, but like a lot of people, I assumed this was going to be state-run media. It's run by WWE. It's a company that's notorious for like having a very firm grasp on the messaging and what people say. And so I never really expected, as much as they try to position After the Bell, Corey's show, is like, this is the edgy show where we're going to talk about the stuff the company doesn't want us to talk about. I was like, yeah, all right. I'll
but they
believe
did.
that when I see it.
They did try
for
that.
a little bit.
They
for
were
a little
told. So do you know how? I don't know if you know this. Corey used to. I kind of oddly followed Corey in that he was, when he came off of NXT, because he had gotten the concussion and they gave him, I remember, Triple H, of course they filmed it. Why don't you come work behind the scenes, pal? Like, that kind of thing. And they put him on TV as a commentator, and he did a really good job. Him and Tom Phillips is still probably my favorite post-JR and King team. They were fantastic together. But Corey was the Stanford guy, other than Scott Stanford, who's going to work there forever, as he should. Love Scott. But Corey was the Stanford guy. So Corey did all of those shows from there, whether it be, best ofs or, little documentary stuff or whatever. He would do the intros to all that. That was his job. And they kind of started, he hadn't gotten, maybe he'd been doing the commentary, but they liked him. He hit with everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
From panels to commentary to what was that show at JBL?
Put it on the table or something, or
throw it on the table,
throw it on the
whatever
table,
it was. They just ganged up on Rosenberg the whole time. Like,
yes,
but Corey was around and doing that stuff, and then he's allowed to move back to Pittsburgh or wherever he was from, but he had to fly in, I think from Raw or whatever, to come tape After the Bell in the Bump studio. And they had very Corey lighting with like those weird lamps and stuff. And he would just like sleep behind the table because it was not a fair schedule to him at all.
No, I mean, I think it was Tuesday mornings or when we recorded those couple months. And like most of the time I'd get there early, my boss would bring in like donuts and coffee and say like, hey, go wake Corey up. And I'd have to go into the studio, and Corey, understandably exhausted, he had to get up ungodly hours, fly out to Stamford and just take a nap in the studio until we were ready for him. And then we'd pull him in, we'd have our little kind of meeting beforehand. But yeah, his schedule was nuts.
So I'll tell you a story about that. We go out to do watch along in Houston. This is the Edge Rumble. This is the Drew McIntyre Rumble, and I'm out there all weekend. And it's my first Rumble. We had this guy on watch along, which was fantastic.
Yep.
And I knew about Edge. I knew he was coming back. I knew he was supposed to be a bump guest that week. This is fantastic. And I was scheduled to fly to Miami the following week to cover the Super Bowl for the company.
Right. We sent a bunch of people. We sent the New Day to record podcast episodes there.
Right. And that all got mixed up. And I was me and a producer. And it was just like, go to the Gronk party. Go to the Shaq party. I was like, cool. And they were like, well, you can go early. And I was like, no, like someone told me, like, why don't you go early and you could do the show? I was like, no. I know who's coming in this week. And I wasn't supposed to know or whatever. So
word got around even with stuff like that.
Of course it did.
Although heard that too, yeah.
I think word got around about Edge's return from some of the dirt sheets, which is, it's going to happen. And it's still got a big pop and it still worked out and all that stuff. So I know Edge is coming in. I say, nah, I'll fly out right after the show. So, which is what was scheduled. And during the watch along, I get a message saying, we don't have Edge. They're pulling him. And I had no idea why, because I'm literally watching the Rumble.
From the Rumble?
No, he's in the Rumble.
The Rumble's going right
he's
there.
Coming on the bump. He's coming to Stanford. He's coming back. We don't have him. And I get no replacement. I just get told we don't have him. Okay. Bummed. As I'm on the air, I'm trying not to sell my disappointment. And then Drew wins the Rumble. And I'm like, let's get Drew. And Drew comes in and it works out. Corey had to tape Tuesday. And what the reason was Edge getting pulled was Randy does the concerto or whatever. He beat the hell out of him on Raw. So they wipe him off TV. And Beth was supposed to be on Corey's podcast. And Beth was doing NXT commentary. So they wanted her to sell that and not talk about it on Corey's podcast.
Right.
So your predecessor comes to get me and goes, hey, they won't let Beth do the podcast. Can you come on and do it? And I go, oh, sure. What an opportunity. I'm on Corey's podcast. I've been there for 4 months. Absolutely. And it was me and Rhonda were the guests.
Right. She was calling in. You were in studio, right?
I sat right next to him. We taped the opening
I was
segment.
there at that point. Yeah.
Okay, you were. Okay.
Yep.
So were you in that meeting then?
I was in that meeting, yeah, because I was just kind of learning about you, because I remember we were talking about like scrambling to get a guest, and it was someone that was aware of you and kind of pointed out some of the work you'd been doing. I checked it out and was like, oh yeah, that seems great. Corey was like, absolutely, yeah. I talked to him. So we pulled you in. You were in person. That was a bonus, because at the time it was weird because Corey would be,
he had that weird bar desk thing.
Yeah, looking at, you're used to this from the bump, just looking at a screen, but you're in studio. It's kind of a weird dynamic. And
he didn't have in studio guests at all. I don't think. Maybe
I think
one.
With Triple H, they had in
studio. Oh,
studio.
sure. Right.
Yep.
But they shot that in a way that was different or whatever. But
sure.
I get brought in and we sit and they're like, hey, come on to the pre-show meeting. So it's like, hey, we'll talk about the Rumble. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm going to compare Drew to Shawn winning in 95. It's a star-making moment. We haven't had that here in a while. Cool. And he goes, hey, what'd you guys think of Becky last night? And Becky is in her, this is what? A year removed from the Mania 35 main event.
Yes, because you had Mania. This was a couple months prior to Mania 36. She had been champ for almost a year. And I remember we were having that meeting and we are just kind of going over talking points. Like, okay, what are we going to talk about here? And I think we all kind of agreed that, Becky was dominant babyface champion for so long that she wasn't getting booed. There hadn't been a turn yet, but you could see it coming. And we all know how wrestling fans are. And it's like, this might happen. And we just posited maybe it'd be interesting to talk about the what if the fans turn on the man,
Corey thought she acted heelish the night before on Raw, and I actually agreed. She had that goat jacket, and it had everybody.
That's right, with the stuffed goats, and she was being a little cockier, and
she was cocky, and I was
leaning into it. Yeah,
and I was like, yeah, I watched. And I was like, yeah, she was. I'm not going to say that. That's a word we weren't using, and he's like, yeah, I think I'm going to talk about that. Like he wanted to see if we agreed, and I was like, yeah, I think she kind of did. And he's like, all right, and so I go in and I shoot my segment. That's it. I don't listen to it. I don't hear about it. Whatever. And then, he does that segment on the show, and he talks about the man being cocky. I don't think, did he say heel? He might have been allowed to say heel at that point.
At that time, there were looser restrictions on some insider terminology. I want to say babyface and heel was fine. I think there might have even been a time where, mentioning AEW or acknowledging its existence without, obviously, you can't ever put it over, can't really talk about, oh, the show was great or anything, but, the reins were a little looser before that show and that Becky segment.
And he says what he says, and I found out, I don't know how I found out, but Heyman threw him under the bus. Heyman went to Vince and was like, Corey said this. And if I'm not mistaken, you can fill the blank in here, that changed the entire dynamic and structure of the podcast.
Yeah, my understanding was Vince made a phone call on Sunday, and it was, with no room for misinterpretation, we are not allowed to have opinion-based content on the podcast anymore, which puts us, with the producer, the host, everyone that works on it, what the hell is this? What is this show then? Why are people listening to this? Is it just access? Is we can have toothless interviews with, NXT talent we bring in? What is the point if we can, Corey's a guy who's smart and knows wrestling and has opinions about wrestling. And I can see why they brought him in as the host if they wanted to actually stick to their guns and be like, oh, this is the show where we're really going to talk about stuff. But you don't take a guy like Corey and put him in front of a mic and just have him do the company line. And it becomes a toothless show at that point.
And I know it bothered him, as it should have. And by the way, congrats that you actually got direction on your show from Vince, because that never happened on our show. They didn't even pay attention to it.
Well, I don't think Vince has any idea who the hell I am. So
which is a great thing, because I think I fit into that too. It's a nice spot to kind of be like, he might have seen me once. That's good.
I don't know if you always heard that term, the Eye of Sauron, while we were there. It's if you're not within the Eye of Sauron, the further you are from that, the better. It's good if he doesn't know who you are, because you're not getting any of that ire. You're also not getting any of the attention in case you need answers on something. But I would take that over being in his purview,
You just reminded me of something. I don't think people know this. You know how the network was programmed and why, right?
Is it the elevator?
Yes.
Yeah, the elevator. It's in Stanford.
So I don't think anybody watches. There's the VOD portion of the network, which is Peacock for a lot of people, and you just go pull up what you want. I think that's how the majority of people use it, unless there's a pay-per-view on or something.
Is there a live component anymore?
Because
there used to be.
I don't know. Well, I guess I don't even know that answer, because I know that if I'm going to watch King, Queen of the Ring, it's right there. It's the banner's on top. It gets the spot. And there's, this stuff's coming up. I think the live, if it's live or whatever's on, it's just there now.
It always reeked to me of like an old man who's used to TV being the way it used to be and being like, well, something has to be on. What's on today? What's on in the elevator, But
they had I understood the linear feed of here's the schedule of events, and sometimes stuff would premiere and they didn't put it on demand right away. And then they got better with that. But they literally made the linear feed just for Vince.
Sure.
It was just for him. So when it was on in the network, in the elevator at Titan Towers, or probably in his office where it had like one channel.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom just said it, there's no linear feed on Peacock. So
I thought they did away with that quietly, yeah.
Right. It did exist on the network. So there was a schedule, and you can go see, okay, this is coming up. And some of the stuff was live, whether it be the bump or whether it be premieres of stuff, or but the feed was booked for Vince.
Did you ever hear the story about, I forgot who said this, but like why Ricochet got pulled up to the main roster?
I've told you that. I think I told you this
it was you that told me that. I thought it probably was, yeah.
Sure. And this has never been confirmed.
Sure.
The feed is on all over. It still is. Hell, my face is still in that building all the time because the best stuff.
Abandoned building, ghost town with just the
that too. But also in the new building, my face is on all the time. No residuals, by the way, so they could pay me for that too if they'd like to. But the 6-way North American title ladder match, I think, was on.
Yep, that New Orleans takeover,
and Ricochet's in it. So someone was like with Vince in the elevator, and Vince sees Ricochet. He's like, God damn, that guy's pretty good, huh, pal? Something
like the backflip off the ladder or something. He's like, right. Wow, look at that. Yeah.
Ricochet got called up like within the month. And nobody ever confirmed. But you cannot tell me that Vince was watching NXT all the time. Vince saw him do that and was like, get that guy, pal.
That was his first exposure to Ricochet. He was like, wow, look at that.
Brought him up with Aleister Black, and he had
the tag team.
They got on Mania. They were in one of those.
They had that great takeover match, that tag match with the War Raiders, right?
I think so. And then they had they were like a 4-way on Mania, like they were part of one of those random Raw or SmackDown. But yes, if you think things are weird, that kind of stuff absolutely did happen. But so that Corey kind of lost his teeth in the show. And believe me, from doing this for 280 plus episodes, plus Raw Talk and SmackDown Load and everything, it was always hard to find that gray area. Because you don't, a lot of people have said something like, hey, you can talk freely now. It's like, yeah, but I wasn't paid to talk that way.
Well, and
we had a job. We had a job.
But also, like, it depended on the show. Like, Edge and Christian had that, the show that Reeks of Awesomeness or whatever, and they would have a whole segment where it's like, oh, here's, will they let us talk about TNA? Will they let us mention the Bullet Club? Things like that. And so, like, that show would get away with stuff, probably because it involved, like, Edge and Christian. And then others, it's just different rules with different shows, with different talent, and everything was very unwritten, and it made it very difficult to know where the lines were.
People would get scared, too. Mm-hmm. Higher ups would get scared of.
That was the entire culture. It was the culture of fear that I've talked about before, where it's like everyone was afraid of getting fired all the time, and for good reason. I can't tell you how many like red wedding days there were, where it's like everyone's getting fired today. Everyone's getting fired. Like
we had a couple of those, and you just wait.
I have no idea how the podcast team avoided. Like we didn't have any layoffs, and like I quit. And then I think it was like several months later, it was like 6 months later or something. That's when they actually like the TKO stuff happened. And then there were actually like layoffs and stuff. But there were some rough days there.
There was. Maybe more stories for another time as it relates to that, because I was present for that stuff before my own. You came in, though. What did you walk into? Besides the Corey podcast and the New Day podcast, which was the best and you became a part of, and I do want to get into that because you were an integral part of that show on and off the mic. What did you walk into, though, that was already in development?
Well, I got hired being told, like, you're going to come in and you're going to come up with new podcasts. I was like, great. I've always been kind of like a idea machine with every place I've worked at. And I was like, I can bring that here.
Hey, wait, real quick. Where were you coming from at that time?
Giant Bomb.
Okay. So you were at Giant Bomb in a different role than you're in now.
I was at Game Informer, then I was at Giant Bomb, then I went to WWE.
Okay,
so I come in, and they're like, hey, we hired you. Why don't you come in to the Barclays Center, come behind the scenes, kind of meet some people? I'm like, okay, great. They take me in, and to my knowledge, or what I learned was they had already greenlit an Alexa Bliss podcast. And I was not aware of this beforehand. I wish I had been in the early meetings about that, because, like, Alexa, very nice person, didn't have any issues working with her, but wouldn't have been my first pick for a podcast host. I don't know what the angle is there. I found out later, like, I think it was Endeavor Audio that we were working with at that point, and there was a really popular podcast called Call Her Daddy. And I think they wanted, like, what's WWE's Call Her Daddy going to be? And it was like, I guess they wanted Alexa because it was like, it's also a young blonde woman, I guess. And so, like I was saying earlier, you need, like, what is the angle? What is the passion? What is the, like, you need to bring some genuine emotion out of people with this stuff. And it's like, we got to know Alexa a little bit, talk to her, and it's like, what is she passionate about? What could she talk passionately about? And, she likes 90s culture. She likes 90s music, things like that. So it's like, all right, let's try to turn this idea that I would not have greenlit if I had been there, but let's try to turn chicken shit into chicken salad here. And, she is passionate about this. Maybe she'll surprise us. And again, very nice person. Never had any problems with Alexa Bliss.
She was, I want to say that again. Lovely person.
Yeah.
Super nice. Great at her job. Great actor. All those things. Maybe, I guess, to a fault because she was so popular. And I think that's why she fell in your lap with the show.
Yeah, she was very popular, and I could kind of see the reasons where they're like, if they're just looking for names and stuff, but I don't know. I don't think the company really knew how successful podcasts came together. And so I was kind of stuck with this idea, and I was like, all right, what can I turn this into? And I came up with the idea of, like, let's lean into what she's passionate about. And, like, we talked to her about, what are you into? And okay, so we're going to bring in NSYNC as guests. We're going to bring in the guy from Hanson, the guy who played the genie in the Aladdin musical. She liked comedy, and I've known Nikki Glaser for 20 years. So I brought in Nikki Glaser to be on the show. And, Alexa was in a rough position where it's like she was not ever in that type of position. Well, I guess she had the Moment of Bliss talk show on Raw.
But that was in character. This was not supposed to be. That's what I mean. But I don't. But I do think that is something that is very tough to negotiate. Is you're playing a character on television, and I know this is going to be part of the story here in a second. But then they want you to be. They wanted her to be Lexi Kaufman. Like, that's what they, I think, wanted. They wanted to tap into that. We had that with the bump. As, okay, I know you got a story, but for TV, and you got to fight this person, and let's pump. But if we could bring you in a little bit, more people will care about you. She had that. She's a very likable person on TV. She played a heel. She played a face. She was very good. She's probably the best actor in the company.
Yeah,
but then you ask her to be her.
Yeah, and you go through it. It's like telling The Undertaker to be Mark Calloway after 30 years of being The Undertaker. It's like when everything of her training, through the Performance Center and NXT and everything was being this character and portraying things this way and talking this way, and then suddenly turn the cameras on and you're like, hey, be Lexi, be Lexi. It's like, you can't just do that overnight. And so, yeah, I recorded the few with her, and then we brought in, our friend that we talked about, and he kind of took over that show as showrunner. And it was always a difficult thing, not because of Lexi or anything, but because of just the concept. And, I tried to tell people the whole, we're going to try to make this the best show we can, but there is nothing about this idea that makes me think anyone is going to tune in. And then it comes out, and, like, I kind of took it as a I told you so moment, because we see the numbers, and I'm trying to point to them because, like, I had started doing a side video game podcast because, like, I had no creative freedom at WWE, so I'm just, like, losing my mind. So that's when I start Twitch streaming. I start the Fire Escape Cast, like my side gaming podcast. I know the numbers on both. One of those shows had $1 billion marketing machine behind it and global celebrities, and they're pulling in this number. And I got me and my Yahoo friends giving each other shit and talking about video games over here 5-6 times the numbers that the one with the $1 billion marketing machine behind it is. And I definitely was telling my bosses and bosses' bosses that, like, hey, maybe you should listen to me. Maybe I know something about podcasts here. Let's not greenlight something in the future if I say it's going to be a bad idea. But when I came in, it was already in motion. They'd already signed things, decks and stuff, and deals had been signed or whatever. So kind of had to work with that one. And it had one season, and then that never came up again.
That was it. Well, the other part of it was she wound up in the Fiend storyline or started
Yes.
to turn. And I remember like we had her on the bump because we started taping those at the pandemic. And we're like, hey, what should we ask you or not? And she's like, I don't know. I'm not sure how deep I'm supposed to go with this. And, and then you guys had to negotiate around that as she's becoming part of that story, which is as far away from podcasting as you get. And I get it. Look, with Up, Up, Down, Down, there's baby faces and heels mingling, and I get that. That's kind of its. But now you're asking her in a massive story to be that person on TV and then go, hi, I'm Lexi, and welcome to this show, and here's Lance Bass.
It's not just that she was a heel on Raw. It was that, like, on Raw, she's, puking up blood and she's got a super long tongue and got spooky dolls and stuff. And then over here, it's like, hey, remember the 90s? And it's like, oh, man, like all it's going to take is like Bruce Pritchard hearing about this once. And then it's like, which honestly might have been a mercy kill. But, like we were trying to warn people like this might get cut down.
But then you had to we would do stuff, whether it's your show or any of that. And then you'd hear after the fact, like, you can't do that. It's like, cool. Yeah. Could you have let us know like months prior?
Dude, a crazy one was, I think Edge was on at some point, and we were putting together video clips and stuff like that. And, so we would show a clip from After the Bell, and it'd be Corey talking to Edge. And we're just seeing him, fight legends and stuff like that. Just kind of a sizzle reel of Edge's moments through the years and his career. And it went up, and one of the clips was like, I think it was Edge spearing Taker while they're on the announce table. Thought nothing of it. It was just part of like 20 clips of him doing cool stuff. We were pulled into a room and we're like, what the hell were you thinking? And we're like, what do you mean? You showed Edge spearing Undertaker during that reel. How did you approve this? And it's like, what's the problem with that? It's like, he's the Undertaker. Why are you showing him, looking weak and taking offense? And it's like, why were we supposed to know that? No one ever explained that.
That's the first time I've ever heard of that right there.
It sounded to me like the old things when I was reviewing, SmackDown vs. Raw 2007 and stuff for the local Kansas newspaper, and the embargo stuff is like, don't show Triple H on the defense, stuff like that. So, but you're never told that. I worked for the damn company, and we were pulled in and kind of yelled at for like, why would you do something so crazy? And it's like, well, maybe somebody should have told us that was off the table.
And that would happen at odd times. It would happen after the fact, and you'd get in trouble after the fact, or you get don't do that. Oh, now you'd only get paid attention when you did something wrong. Because other times you would just fly under the radar. Sometimes good, a lot of times bad. Because like, hey, we need to promote this. Like if you want us to be a thing, we got to put it out there. Can we put up that great Stambino question there for Dan about developing podcasts, if you will? Developing podcasts. Do you have a team dedicated to do research to find out about the guest, or is it more like pre-screening the guest prior to the interview? So how did you guys on the team handle those interviews for Corey? Or New Day, for that matter.
I mean, I want to say for all my frustrations I had with the company and the hierarchy and the processes and everything, the podcast team that I worked with was fantastic. I loved everyone that I worked with, and I keep up with many of them. And we would, we had wrestling fans on the crew. Our mutual friend, huge wrestling fan. I'm a longtime wrestling fan. So like, we would just kind of know. And Corey's hosting it, so it's like it was never too hard to like, oh, who is this guy? Let's go to Wikipedia. It's like, let's come up with some interesting talking points. Let's ask some questions that like we can get away with, but aren't the obvious go-to every Radio Row question, So, we were able to get some interesting conversations out of it, even if we did have to be, even if opinion was banned, which is a crazy thing to say.
Well, speaking of opinion, I remember this episode, and I remember it being a big deal, and now I know it could have been an even bigger deal. You guys went to TV. And you recorded with Cena. What was he doing before we get? What was he doing at the time? What was he back for? Back.
So the big thing was he was coming back, and it was like he came back with no real reason. He was just at Boston. I think it was at the Garden, and so it's just like, oh, John Cena is going to be here, and that was when the Fiend came out. If I remember right, was the promo something like Cena being like, oh, I'm not going to be at WrestleMania this year? But,
and then Fiend did the point, and then that was it.
And then the hat tip thing, it's like, but Cena's going to fight him, or that might have been next week.
That was Was it with a crowd? Was this setting up the Firefly Funhouse match?
There was a crowd. This was like early rumblings I think this was like late February. You could look it up. It's whenever the Boston one that Cena came back. It was a SmackDown, I want to say.
So, because I was at the Chamber in Philly, and then the Rudy Gobert stuff happens 4 days later. But it had started to be like, what the hell's going on here? So They set the match up in front of. Was it the night they set the match up and this Fiend just does the point?
If that's the one where Fiend points, and I think Cena did the hat tip, I believe that was the night.
And Fiend had lost to Goldberg.
Yes.
Which, by the way, and I'm not defending the decision, but at the time when they posted that picture of Goldberg with the Universal title, it was the most liked picture like in WWE history. And a lot of people were like, see, and Goldberg, and maybe you can attest to this, clicked well. As much as he drove, he was still a big star. So
100%.
Did we need to see him all the time? No. You knew what he was, but that guy did well numbers-wise. The matches weren't pretty, but everything else, he was worth his weight at that point in time. Continue with the Cena. Oh, go ahead. Yes.
Well, your recollection is correct too, because I remember we were setting up with Cena backstage in this like bar area, and Roman walked by because we were in the same area where people were getting their haircuts and stuff. Roman comes back to get his hair trimmed up or beard trimmed or whatever. And I think Elias or someone was back there, and they're like, "What are you doing tonight, Roman?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm just going out there and saying, I'm next, bitch," something like that.
Right.
So it would have been like to set up Roman Goldberg.
Somebody said there, Phil just said the tip of the hat was the day after Saudi, because at those times the Saudi shows were on Thursday morning afternoons, and they would come back. That's why the crew got stuck in before Survivor Series. We talked about that recently. They got stuck on that Thursday, and then everybody had to come back for Friday and turn into the NXT show. So I remember that because we did that weird like video Twitter question thing for the bump account as the show was going on like a Thursday, and we're like watching it, and we were just answering random questions. But the tip of the cap would have been late February, the day after the Saudi show a SmackDown. But then there's probably 2 SmackDowns after that we're done. 2 or 3, maybe.
Yeah, so this is like one of the last live SmackDowns before things shut down for the pandemic. There were probably like 2 or 3 after this. And like, if the pandemic had been getting talked about, it was probably just rumblings at this point of like, oh, there's this thing in China happening, but like no one was talking about it coming here. But anyway, we recorded in February with Cena for an episode that was supposed to go up Mania week. It was supposed to be our big WrestleMania episode, John Cena. And Cena starts talking about the importance of the fans. And he says something like, I've got the audio somewhere, where he says like, if you doubt the importance of those people out there, of those fans, try making a wrestling show with no one in those seats and try to see how many people tune in, because no one's going to tune into that. And so by the time that episode is supposed to go up, turns out pandemic hits, there's nobody in those seats, and ratings plummet. And of course, I hear like, you got to go into that episode and cut that out. And so that
there it is.
Cut out.
That's what they have to work in with the lights, and that changed a bunch of times. And they set up the Roman match with a Michael Cole interview. It's the only time the bump got referenced, because Goldberg said he had a better spear than Roman, and it got addressed. And that was Mojo messing with Cole and Triple H and and all that stuff. But Cena had to come out. I think, doesn't the Fiend pop up from like the barrier where no people were, and then they started playing with the camera.
Spooky thing, yeah. Like,
but also wild that Cena called it. Like, how did he know?
Totally Nostradamus Cena stuff, where it's like nobody was even talking about this as a possibility. And like, I remember that first day I was supposed to go to Detroit. I think it was a SmackDown. And like, it was like day of, I found out that my flight changed, and they're like, you got to go to Orlando. They're just going to record it. They're canceling the Detroit SmackDown. We're going to figure something out at the Performance Center. So I'm suddenly like day of, like, oh, guess I'm going to Orlando. And I remember standing around a hotel conference room with Corey, Baron Corbin, and Mandy Rose, because they were the guests on the show that day. And we're all just standing around like, what is this going to look like? What are they going to do during breaks, during matches? Are they just going to like stop and just kind of check their watches for 3 minutes and be like, all right, we hate each other again, like that type of stuff. So incredibly wild time to be there, and to have like 2 months of normalcy by wrestling standards,
right? And
then to get thrust into this, and then like 2 years of producing podcasts from my closet in Stamford,
And I had to do the same thing. It was very much like I told the story the other day on Friday of being one of the last. I think I was the last talent in Stanford, and it was just like, hey, can we do best ofs? I was like, sure, I'll shoot whatever you need. Can you come up with a top 10 list of Mania matches? And I was like, sure. And that was very much like, throw it up against the wall, see what happens. And I just got in the bump studio, and I shot one of them like really nicely with Giancarlo, and we couldn't finish. So then, like, they just threw us, and they wanted all to look the same, and then they ended up on Fox Sports 1. It was like, best. I was like, cool, I'm on cable tonight.
Did you ever do the thing where, like, the early Thunderdome shows, when they had the screens, and, like, they threw it up there, and then it's like, okay, here's, like, KKK stuff and beheading videos and stuff, and they quickly were like, how do we fix this? And then so they would do, like, a friends and family thing, where before they would allow, like, the general public in, they would send a link out to people that work there and be like, hey, share this with people you trust. And you would get in there like a half hour before Raw or SmackDown went live, and they would give you like a secret thing where it's like, all right, everyone, if you're friends and family, go grab a spatula and hold it up to the camera. And that'll show, like, that's the secret code that you're like, okay, we'll put you in the first few rows that are going to get on cam and stuff like that.
Or people would put up pictures of those like Benoit stuff or anything like that.
Of course. I mean, it's the internet. What do you like? Anyone who's ever been
there is what it looked like. And if like you look at some of those and as I've told people,
who's that guy in the ring?
I don't know. I tell you what, I guarantee they didn't show him walking in the ring. I guarantee they didn't show him walking in the ring on that night because it was written to not show Vince walking for a time. I bet you guys didn't know that.
Interesting. I don't think
cut around it. They would shoot around it because he was not at peak Vince.
Oh.
But to your point with those screens, I remember pitching like, hey, put the bump in like the front row. Like put us there. Let's like, you know, that stupid term that someone used to use the word, let's gamify it. I was like, okay, cool. Like find us in the crowd. And then they did at least start figuring out like, hey, let's put Matthew McConaughey in the crowd. Hey, there's Goldberg. And you showed like one little thing. So at least you can, I'm here.
The NXT, it's like when they're sitting in a ringside, it's just a quick like, hey, look at this. Oh,
right.
Nikitas is at WrestleMania. Look at him.
But they started to kind of figure, and you would get kicked out, which I don't think, I guess if you're in the chat, let us know. Did you get on during the Thunderdome time? Were you in the crowd at all?
I went to go pee and I came back and like they kicked me out for like inactivity.
That was a thing. And I've said it. Everybody did what they had to do during that time. Mm-hmm. I never want to watch any of that stuff again.
No, but as a company, like it is kind of amazing. Like for as much as like we hated the hierarchy and the processes and a lot of the people up top and everything, the crew, the production people, the bump people, the podcast team, the fact that we were able to transition so quickly, where it's like none of us had used Zoom before on the podcast team.
No.
So when this happens, we didn't miss a single week. You know, it's like, we're going to figure this out. Okay, I guess this is going to record video. We can do local audio. And then like having to do things like I did, like teach The Undertaker how to use Zoom. You know, things like that where it's like, all right, this is going to be some weird.
The amount of times we had to do like, okay, we had, what was the program we used? What was that company? They spent way too much money on it.
A video thing?
It was like the video calling system. There was a couple different ones.
Was it X? Oh God, what was it called?
There was a few different ones, and like let's try. And I was always like the guinea pig for it. Like, okay, when you get home, get on there, and we'll see if it works. And like that was how like we got bump guests on. But then like you'd have to give the talent like, okay, get this link, and then put it here, and then this stuff will be on the side, and then you got to be able to look here, which was fine with most of the current talent. But when we're going to like Hall of Famer, thank God those shows were taped because they had to be. They had to, but once again, trying to make things work the best we could.
Yeah, like we sent like packs out to the New Day and Corey where it's like, okay, here's your mics, here's a webcam, here's basically how to use it. You know, we can configure the laptops to be, you know, hey, just click this thing on the desktop, and they figured it out, obviously. And then it's like, okay, you got Harvey Whippleman on the show this week, and he's in his backyard with bad Wi-Fi. Have fun.
Only because Robert asked, I have to bring it up. Jeff Hardy's Wi-Fi, legendarily bad across the board. Like, there you go. Thank you, Paul. Jeff Hardy's internet. Okay, so Matt and Jeff live like down the road from each other in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina.
Share Wi-Fi that the router's in a lake or something.
But like, I saw what Rebby did. Like, they were putting out. Jeff's Wi-Fi was the worst, and we get him on the bump, and it's at that point it was like, hey, do more episodes. We were like making more, and Jeff's on, and he's got all his paintings behind him, and I think I asked him like, hey, no more words coming back. And his answer was like, yeah, but it what and I was like, and I knew what he was saying, but it was like barely usable, and it should have. And I was like, ooh, that'll click well. That'll get us on the top of Reddit. And yes, I did care about that stuff because that's how people would see things. And like the interview was like basically half usable.
He was very, very nice.
So
about everything.
nice.
Like he would
So
repeat
nice.
stories if he had to, things like that. But yeah, that was the worst. That and Harvey Whippleman's backyard had the worst Wi-Fi, I think.
I remember we once did a show and we had Dana on, and Dana had a little run. Dana Brooke going, and she had like this red.
I don't know why I thought you were talking about Warrior.
She was unfortunately on too. Hold on. Wait, now I got two. Thank you. This is why this happens. I try to put a rundown together, and I'm like, I can't remember this. I can't remember. And then you say that, and I just remembered. All right, so two things. First of all, Dana was in like Money in the Bank, and I want to say she was in the Tower Money in the Bank because the 20.
Sure.
Okay, but she had a little something going, and she had like this red, white, and blue boxing ring in her backyard, and she was sitting on it, and it was like, hey, that's kind of a fun shot. Like it's a very organic shot. It's not, homogena. It's not the typical, this has got to look. We're like, hey, that's cool. Dana's got a ring in her backyard. More importantly, though, Dana Warrior came on, and I have to. Did you ever have to interview her?
No.
There was a reason. She came on, and we had to hawk Ultimate Warrior wine.
Oh, that was the same time the Undertaker wine was coming out.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think either,
All
and
the
I'm not a
stars
wine
were there.
person, I don't think either one of them was very good.
No.
And she's on there, and we're asking, I'm going, I don't want to talk about him at all. And I never wanted to talk to Hogan at all. But we had to sell her wine while she was an employee of the company. And by the way, you know what she was very involved in? The Bobby Lashley, Liv Morgan, Lana wedding in Hartford. And I was at that show.
The one with the priest that ran into the ring, right?
Yeah. Oh, right. Which, by the way, was intentional because Vince thought it was funny. The guy who kind of looked like Bill Belichick.
Yep.
And they do this. So it's the last Raw of the year. It's in Hartford. And that's the big thing. That's the big. Oh, I'm so glad you brought this up.
This is when there were like 17 concurrent cuck angles going on, right?
Yes, it was. So that was, let's see. Would that have been end of 2019? Right.
I think there was some Rusev stuff. Oh, no, Rusev was part of the Lashley thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rusev was, because Lana was with Bobby, and then Liv came out as her lover. But that was also, now I'm thinking of Live Forever and how they had to reshoot that 14 times.
Oh, wait, was that the thing where she was in a bathtub for like 2 months? Yeah. Oh, I completely
They changed
forgot
her
about
creative 3 different times, and they had to keep redoing the ending. Poor Giancarlo had to deal with so much crap.
Was this
so
before
many
or after
times.
Emelina? This was after Emelina, right?
Like the Lana, the Lana Emelina or the Emelina Emelina?
No, remember the 2 months of Emelina vignettes where she's just like, the new Emelina is coming. Yeah.
And then it wasn't, and then Lana just kind of took the story.
Yep.
But at that Hartford Raw, it was like Bobby had the cutoff tux.
Good look.
But was dead serious about it. Like, that was just like, oh, no. It wasn't supposed to be played for laughs. That was just like, oh, Bobby would wear that. And
how is that not inherently hilarious?
This is such a funny thing that happened, and it's very unintentional because of how it looked. So the whole night they're getting ready, and it's a big angle, and it's just, this is it. This is our main event slot. And I saw Liv, and I knew she'd be involved. And Lana's trying to and Dana Warrior's the one who's like in charge of the segment. She was assigned. Her creative brain was the one that was in charge of this whole thing. And she's talking to Bobby, and they're talking to Liv, and they're talking to Lana. And I'm watching this just outside of Gorilla with Viking Raiders and Sarah, KO, and I want to say one other person. And as someone just said, CW Summer, car crash perfection. It was so bad and such a mess. And if you remember, like, Elektra Lopez wasn't signed yet. She does the run-in. She was like Bobby's first wife. She didn't have a name.
I forgot about that.
And then Lana like goes to kiss Bobby and gets his makeup on her head. And if you can figure out different skin tones there based on the makeup, so she had like this brown makeup across, and it just happened. So she looks either like she's doing an unfortunate blackface, or that like someone smeared, well, I shouldn't even say that because somebody would have liked that at Gorilla. But you know what I'm saying? Like it just looked brown across her head. It was just the worst. And we're all cracking up laughing, and then Liv comes out and they have the fight, and that's it.
There are so many things creatively that creative regime had wrong, especially at that time. Like 2019 was kind of a low point, but historically, sense of humor. Intentional. Here's the thing: very funny things have happened in wrestling, but it has been in spite of the company. It has been performers that are hilarious. It was Steve Austin and Kurt Angle and performers being funny. Stuff that was written to be funny. Oh my God, almost never ever funny. You had times though where Matt McCarthy, host of We Watch Wrestling, he was a writer for Conan. He would write stuff. I believe he wrote, remember when the Team Hell No stuff was going on, the therapy angle where Kane is, straight faced talking about his history. And it's hilarious. Like every once in a while, something actually funny would get in, but in spite of the company. I feel like the creative leads at that company have had the worst, Natalia farting or just her breath is stinky stuff. Like
Shorty G.
Oh, Shorty G.
Shorty G. I was there for Shorty G, and I watched Chad Gable try his damnedest to make it work. And thank God he's got better stuff now, and I hope he gets paid.
How great is it, though, like now seeing like a Gable or Liv or these talents that have, always been talented and done the best with the crap they've been given, and now seeing, like the Gables and the Livs, like really getting to shine.
Get a shine, get a chance. Some people float, some people don't, and Gable's doing that. Let's talk about restriction, because I mentioned that when I got hired and got pitched in one of my second interviews about the show The Bump, we're going to talk about Raw, we're going to talk about SmackDown, we're going to talk about NXT, and maybe we'll get to UK, and maybe, just maybe, we'll talk about AEW. And I was like, cool, that sounds interesting. And I didn't even, not even being, I was like, that's not going to happen, whatever. We knew rules to kind of play with. I was smart enough to kind of go, all right, don't mention this. Like we did the Ultimate show. Anytime someone popped up on AEW, they're not getting booked for Ultimate for probably 6 months. I don't think Sasha got booked for the last 2 years I was there. And Punk only got booked because he showed back up on television. There was stuff like that where we knew. And there would be different rules with that. I'm sure, and I'm going to ask you about that. Jericho's there. We can't use him. Old Docs can use him. Oh, wait, they can interview him. Well, Jericho could be on Austin's podcast. Yeah, right, like all that stuff. What were some of the issues you had to deal with on the podcast front, whether it be New Day or Corey?
It was just that I was given the same line of like, you're going to get to talk about AEW on these podcasts. But then I get there and everyone is afraid of getting fired, again, for good reason. And then all of a sudden, like a boss gets fired, a new boss gets brought in, and their boss gets fired, another boss gets in, and they're all just terrified of getting fired. So everyone plays it extremely safe. So it always just came down to like, oh, New Day told this story about, their friends, Cody Rhodes or Brody Lee. And it's like, well, we can't talk about them because they're in the other company right now. So the amount of times we had to cut that stuff out. And then I got to be the bad guy half the time and like talk to like New Day and be like, I'm sorry, guys, I had to cut out this super innocuous thing. It sucks so bad. And like, it just sucked. Because of course they want to talk about their friends and tell old stories and things like that. And, we had dumb things like Big E had a running bit where he would always talk about wanting his name back, Langston.
His government name.
Yeah, his government name, yeah. And so he would do these fun rants at the beginning of the episodes. And one of them, he was like, good folks, I can't do a Big E. He's the best of this. But like, load up your muskets, storm the castle, demand the good name of Langston return to whence it came from. And then like we had to cut in, like my boss at the time had to cut in and be like, sorry guys, we need to redo the intro. Talking about loading up muskets and, guns and, just worried, that's going to ruffle some feathers. And like, I remember the response was kind of like, we're talking about muskets. We're talking about like Revolutionary War, this obvious, ridiculous scenario we're talking about. And then like, understandably, New Day after that, just like, okay, well, I guess we can't have fun here. I guess we can't, just.
It was the best show. I love that podcast so much.
It was so much fun. I didn't get to do many fun things that I'm proud of at that company because of all the restrictions. But the New Day, at a certain point, once it did just turn into like lunacy, where it's just us talking about toilets and stuff for 40 minutes, and I got to come on and do these ridiculous tournaments with them and everything. There wasn't even a script at all. We would just go in and just talk about random stuff. Sometimes there would be some direction, like a movie tournament or something. I am proud of those. And like the New Day are fantastic. All three of those guys, love working with them. I saw all three of them at Mania this a couple months ago. Just love those guys. So
I love doing stuff with them because they always had the wheels turning. And whether it be like I started stuff with Woods just because we took the studio over, and then that turned into a whole thing, and he broke in and broke the sign, and that was supposed to lead to other stuff, but he got it. He's like, ooh, this could be something. Like he knew right away you know what? We could turn this into something a little bit more. And I understood. I was like, you said my name. That's good enough. That now gets me into the lexicon. Big E, I told the story. Big E doing the, after the big meaty men slapping me, we did the Goldberg match on Dream Match Mania with him and Kofi, and he destroys me. And it was the first time like I got like a spotlight on me because he just was like, screw this guy, but in the best way possible. And those guys completely understood that. I say all the time, Kofi should be the most grizzled, mean person ever based on everything he's been through, and he's the complete opposite of that.
But also a giant troll.
A troll, and
the
don't
best.
let him, the best in the best way. Like him saying, I'm going to beat up your children is the most lovable thing.
I want heel Kofi again.
That run where they went from like straight heels to kind of baby faces, but then they got sarcastic and became too entertaining.
Weird assholes doing a lot of stuff for like, .com or YouTube where it's like, 7 minutes of them yelling at Brandy Rhodes or them doing the Peck Dance Party stuff for the Mixed Match Challenge. Like look up Peck Dance Party, see if it exists anywhere. I think it only lived on like a Facebook video. Just insane, absurdist comedy. And they were the best at it. They would lean so far into it to where it's like, all right, this is going too long, and then come back around to being funny again. Like the comedic sensibilities of all three of those guys is unmatched.
They did before New Day, and I've told the story, I told it on the show. They did second screen theater.
Yeah. With Byron? Was Byron part of that?
Tom. It was a lot of
okay.
Tom Phillips, and I know someone used to work. Brian Pellegato was the one that kind of like let that all happen. And that was kind of the beginnings of the New Day, of the ridiculousness before the gimmick turned into what it was, and then got kind of back to that kind of stuff. Because they could say stuff that all the old people running the show didn't get. And they could get away with it, which was even better.
Like meme stuff. Like I remember I would look up stuff like they would do the "what are those" thing with the shoes, and I would see everyone popping on Twitter for it and everything. And I'd look at them and be like, oh wow, okay, this is like they're actually kind of finger on the pulse with like internet culture and modern things, and not just weird references from whatever Vince found entertainment to be in the 50s. Like singing cowboys or whatever he was obsessed with. But like they were so funny, but also there were times where it's like the George Floyd murder happened in the middle of doing the podcast, and like we can't just turn around and do like 40 minutes of talking about toilets there. And so all of us, this is something very important to me, the New Day, producers, everything, that like we need to do an episode where we can just talk very earnestly about the situation and not just ignore it and do a haha, everything's great episode. And so we also thought it was very important to put it up like the full episode on YouTube. And it was something we fought for because like we hadn't done that in the past.
Right. You didn't do you did the clips. Just
because it was like a Peacock deal where it's like in case they want to move the stuff to Peacock or the network, only a certain percentage of the minutes or whatever, blah, blah, blah. We were like, screw that. This is important that we put this up, and like, don't monetize this. None of this. It's just, I think this is an important thing that we put up. And like everybody was in it for the right reasons and everything. And so that was like me and the podcast team's role was to like talk to all the people between us and Vince and be like, just want to let y'all know we're going to put this thing up. And like all of our bosses were just like, yeah, we'll get back to you on that. We'll see. Yeah, we totally agree with you guys. Yeah, it is really important. Let's just, we'll check with the brass and see if we can do it. And of course, nothing came back. And like, it's getting down to the wire where it's like the new episode is going to go up audio wise. And it's like, we need the green light to put this up on YouTube. And, meanwhile, I'm talking to the guys. I'm talking to New Day and like text them like, we still haven't heard. Sorry, we still haven't heard. We don't know. We're fighting for it. We're going for it. And they were at the PC. And, this is around the time they were recording stuff at the PC. And one of the guys in the New Day was like, you know what? Screw this. I'm at TV. I'm just going to go ask Vince directly. Walked in there, had a 10-second conversation with Vince because Vince had allowed them to do the thing. Remember when like they knelt at the ramp and they put their fists up for like 10 seconds?
I bought the shirt when they put it out. I wore it on the bump. I was like, if they're doing it, we're good.
Yes, and look, there's a billion things wrong with Vince, but it was like, look, he allowed for that, at the top of the ramp, and it's like, let's go ask him if we can just put this up. And one of the New Day guys went up and asked Vince, and he was like, yeah, it's fine. And so it came back, and then all of a sudden, all those people that were afraid between us and the top suddenly were like, "Oh yeah, what a win! Okay, yeah, we knew, we could do it." It's like, feel like a lot of people were sitting on their hands because they were afraid of this, and then like New Day went directly to Vince and just like that's in a nutshell how much of a pain in the ass it was working there because like you would have ideas that like should be done. and it just has to go through 90 layers of bullshit, and all of those layers are afraid of that top layer of bullshit, and there's no way to cut through. When the top guy wants to have his hands on everything, he's not going to give a shit about, he doesn't know what a podcast is. I don't think he ever understood what the hell a podcast was. So like, you just never got answers. You never got stuff greenlit unless you had something like one of the guys in the New Day just cutting through all the bullshit and going to the source.
We've been going for an hour already. I have two more things I want to hit. Number one, did you hear anything or do you know anything about other podcasts that were supposed to happen, maybe that already existed in the podcast world?
There were some, yeah. I can't tell you how long we heard that, like, oh yeah, we're about to bring in Steve Austin's show. You know, like, yeah, we're gonna run that. And I remember thinking, like, hell yeah, like, you know, I listened to Austin's show.
Great.
You talk about someone who's a natural
podcast
podcast host.
God, he's so good.
Austin, like, you know, those classic episodes where he's just like, you know, hunting a fly or whatever in his shed or whatever the hell. That dude just like he was like the best promo ever. And so of course you just put him in front of a microphone, guest or no, and he's going to be so goddamn entertaining. And like that is like my dream as a producer, to like have a talent like that, to where no matter if we have guests or it's just him, just hey, just go. And so I was so excited about that, but it was one of those things where it's like, I don't know how many PowerPoint decks were made. We're like, oh, it's the, you know, summer 2020 lineup of our podcast and Steve Austin show. And then fall 2020, we're going to have the Steve Austin show. And I would just constantly ask, like, how's the Austin stuff looking? How's the Austin stuff looking? And that was from like the moment I came in to the moment I quit. I was like, just still hearing, oh, it's any day now. And it's just like a lot of shit or get off the pot moments where it's
were
like,
you there for Takers?
I was there in person.
Yeah.
He flew up to Stamford.
That's why we interviewed him. Like, people never figured that out.
Oh, he was in town for that. Yeah.
He was in town for that. And we were told he's coming into town. We didn't know why. It was the year after he retired.
Yep.
With the Tesla coils and all that weird retirement thing in front of nobody.
He was a big Command & Conquer fan, to be fair. Yeah. Now that's actually John Cena for real.
Just got anyway. His mic and all that stuff. Yeah, that's I could totally see that. But Taker was interviewed on the bump for the Survivor Series episode. We've split into two because he was coming in to shoot podcasts.
Yep. And we did. We shot 5 episodes.
The one with Heyman is unbelievable. They talk about AEW. They talk about the business. It would have done so, and they just never figured out the deal, I believe, to put it very simply.
No, it's just one of those things that, like, we shot 5 episodes, and honestly, they were really good conversations.
He was better than I expected by himself, I have to say. He had guests on. He had Godfather, but he did kind of handle, because I was like, my first thought was, does he need a host? I'd be happy to lead Taker around. That'd be a great gig. And I watched the first one. I was like, oh, he's going to be fine.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like, he was still trying to figure out what it meant to be Mark Calloway after he retired. And like, he was nervous about it. It was so weird. I'm sitting in a room in Stanford with him.
That's right.
And I was like, look, no one's expecting The Undertaker to be Johnny Carson. Like, we're going to put you in a room with your friends and just shoot the shit with them. Tell old stories, things like that. And in that context, like, he had to be like coached a little bit, but like, he has interesting stories. He had interesting friends and stuff like that. We brought in all these people. I remember a highlight for me was I actually got a giant belly laugh out of The Undertaker once because we had Michael Hayes coming in. And we're just kind of sitting around waiting for him to show up or something. And I was like, Michael P.S. Hayes is like if wrestling turned into a person. And like Taker, it just took like a beat. It was like 3 seconds, and Taker just leaned like, bah, ha, ha. And I was like, yes, I got Taker to laugh. Excellent.
He was fun. I every time I talked to him, it was a good time because we had like the first interview out of character. Other than like I said, he does the thing with Jimmy Kimmel that one time, but we got him on the bump. And we got him for an hour, and he was taped, and he was like, he broke the ice, and he made a joke about 5-star matches in Meltzer. And I was like, what's going? And then he was doing all the media. Mm-hmm. And then he came on like he did the Kane Hall of Fame thing for us. He came on because a couple like used his whole entrance for their wedding, and then he popped on, and then we talked about doing like Dark Cupid as a show, and he's like, I'll make some more money. That's fine. I'll do, what? And he was like very engaging and enjoyable. And I remember we talked to him about Survivor Series, and we talked to him about 94 when he's got the jacket that's got the American flag, which you would think would be great for him. And he's like, I hated that thing, and I made the jacket disappear, which was like, oh, he's like, it wasn't Undertaker. He was very, for a guy who protected it as much as he did, which I totally understood, he was willing to tell those stories. And then they come up with this podcast, and he does the one-man show, and that continues. And now he's doing YouTube Face and making money doing his own thing. Like, Here's Taker's Mount Rushmore. I have to do it too. Believe me, I'm just saying it's kind of hilarious that
like the last person him doing dick pill ads is just like right. Weird. All right.
You want to wake up from the dead? Get Blue Chew. Blue Chew, by the way, glad to have you aboard if you'd like to come on. If you want to just stick with Taker and everybody else, there's no problem. But he was engaging, and I enjoyed talking to him. There's a story, Survivor Series in Boston. It's the only time Bump went on the road. And I'm backstage, and I'm with a couple of executives. And Stephanie had been on the Bump a couple times, and she was backstage at the show. This was War Games, had now made it to the main roster. So this was the Bloodline War Games. So we had done the Bump, and Stephanie comes up, and she talks to one of the executives, and she sees me, and I'm like, she doesn't know the hell I am. She's like, Matt, how are you? I give her a hug, and they're like, we did the Bump from Boston. She's like, that's the first one on the road, right? I was like, yeah, it is. It was really good. She goes, I think we need to do that more. I was like, yes, I agree. And then Taker walks up, and the three of us are talking, which is weird enough for me. And then for whatever reason, I guess because it was Survivor Series, the gobbledygooker walks up. And I was like, hey, same year. You guys debuted at the same time. And Taker lost it. He's like, he's more over than I am that night, or something, whatever the hell it was. And it was the most, I always talk about wrestling Mad Libs. Like backstage at a wrestling show in 2022, Taker will run into gobbledygooker, and Stephanie McMahon will be right there. And I'm just going like, what the fuck is my life right now? Yep. And that stuff would happen because from like the bigger shows. I remember Mania in Dallas. Scott Steiner must have taken 4 to-go things from catering when he was now then allowed back in the company because Hogan wasn't around. And there he is, a guy who has probably made millions of dollars in wrestling, but still old school worker. Mm-hmm. Let me get some of those chicken breasts because I got to eat those tomorrow. And just takes 4 to-go things out of catering in Dallas.
Yyep. I remember
and that was the norm.
Catering in Tampa, the first like the half, we're back with fans and half, cardboard guys or whatever. I watched some of it in catering, and the NWO was next to me. Well, NWO sans Hogan, so it was like Nash, Waltman, and Hall.
The good NWO,
right? Yes. And I'm just sitting next to them in catering, and Nash just going up and just taking a ton of free eggs and just sitting there just eating hard-boiled eggs, just shitting on everything. It's like, this is incredible.
One of my favorites still. His podcast is tremendous. We talk about it all the time on here. And we share some of the same crew, so it's even better. Shout out to Dom. All right, that's a lot of stuff we covered. What are you doing right now? Where could people find you? And then I want to talk a little bit about current day stuff.
People can find me a lot of places. I am at giantbomb.com. We have a live show in Los Angeles going up with Summer Games Fest June 9th at the Bellwether. We're going to do a show there. Tickets are on sale now. Also, our YouTube, we do all sorts of stuff, play bad video games, play new video games, stuff like that. The Fire Escape Cast, which I mentioned earlier, that's the side podcast I started while I was at WWE. Still do that every 2 weeks with my friends. That's a great one. And also Twitch and Instagram, just Dan Ryckert on there. So find me there.
And Dan made I do want to talk about Twitch real quick. I see it behind you. Your Twitch room is back there, correct? Is that
it? The green walls here, yeah. The one I'm facing and this one.
Folks, he moved and painted a room green for Twitch, pretty much. All your stuff.
The last house had one green wall. Here, I wanted 2 green walls, so I got 2. I got full coverage.
Okay, so I've brought up this idea that we tried that you bowed out of, if I'm correct, because you're a good person.
Are you talking about the Twitch stuff?
So the War Room, because there was a few ideas to do shows. So the War Room, and I've told this, and I want to do it here, and I'd love to have you back for it. Mm-hmm. The War Room was basically a fantasy draft show of a subject. So it was 3 to 4 squads of talent and whoever, and it was a weird mix of people. We had a disembodied voice who still works there. And then I was like the host, but I was also in it, which told you they didn't have it all figured out correctly. But we would take a subject and draft it.
We did IC champions, didn't we?
We did European champions, because that was like my thing. And I was like, I'm drafting D'Lo #1, you fools. Mm-hmm. I'm taking, and then like the chat could be involved because they're very much like, get the chat involved, which I get, but not from an executive level. They didn't like They have to be involved. You have to do. It's like, or we could just react like we do right here. Shout out to Captain Wiener, great. Like, they're smart enough, and we're smart enough to pick up. And it was, everybody has to make one trade. But it was 4 to 5 rounds, and you would put together a roster of that subject. And then at the end, the chat was supposed to vote on who did the best. And based on all of that, we were going to try and do like a whole season out of it. And I remember we did it, and we put enough like employees in the chat. So you didn't do the show, right? Or did you do the pilot and then bailed?
We did the pilot, and like I was good on it. I mean, I've been on thousands of hours of podcasts, and I know wrestling, so I knew I'd be good on it. And they offered me like, "Hey, when we do this for real, we want you as one of the spots." And I said no, because I was like, for one, I didn't want to be associated with the Twitch stuff because I thought it was a bad look, because this was around the time they had banned the third party stuff. So Cameo, Twitch, ways that talent could make some money on the side.
Goodbye, Adam Cole. Bye,
exactly.
Adam Cole. See you later.
And I didn't want to associate with that, like, I don't know. I come from the gaming world, and like, I really rubbed me the wrong way that like, hey, these talent were hustling on their off hours, making money, let them make their money. But of course, WWE was trying to get a deal going on with Twitch. They were trying to make, their own money doing this. And they didn't understand how Twitch works. So they all the public sentiment in the world, even before the third party ban, obviously WWE, not exactly the darling of the fans in terms of like moral business decisions.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden you ban third party. And okay, now wrestlers aren't on Twitch, but then all of a sudden you want to launch the WWE Twitch account, and they're asking me like, okay, so how do you make money on Twitch? And I was like, well, okay, it's like subscribers and for ad-free viewing and stuff like that, or bits. But I said, the reason this isn't going to work is because Twitch is all about the small creator. Yeah, there are some big ones. They're the ones that make a ton. There's Kai Sanan, these guys that are making millions or whatever. But ultimately, it's about the small creator.
But they started somewhere.
Yeah, they started somewhere. And like, it is about the person that is making interesting, unique content in their gaming room, things like that. It's not about the big evil corporation trying to get their cut of it. And I said, if a mom and pop grocery store, I said this to my bosses. I was like, if a mom and pop grocery store was doing a GoFundMe, like, hey, it's hard times, we need some help here. Let's stay open for the community. People would be like, hell yeah, we're going to help out. We're going to hop in. But like, if Walmart was like, hey, we're doing a GoFundMe to help Walmart, people would say, fuck you, you're Walmart. And I explained, we're Walmart in this situation. We're already the billion-dollar corporation that just did a bunch of bullshit and got our talent off of Twitch. Why on earth why would you think that fans would be receptive to like, hey, and you should give us money now, even though we won't let our it'll go right to us. The talent won't see any of that. That's, but look, and
getting talent for that was not easy because of that. Same thing.
Understandably.
Why the hell? I totally got it. Hey, listen, no problem. I get it. Why would you? They just took it away from you. They took the Cameo thing. I understood it to a point because people were using their wrestling names.
But even if they could go under a tour and like, well, they still wouldn't be able to do that.
They stopped that too. Right. What I did, because I was like, yeah, Michael Keaton can't go be Batman for himself. I understood that part of it. That had nothing to do with WWE. I would say that about any company. They would not let somebody use a name that wasn't theirs. I got that. But yes, money could have been made on real names and still doing it. And they were like, no. And it's like, they're independent contractors. You shouldn't be able to stop that stuff. So then this comes up. And I think, I don't know if it was a handshake deal. Like, they did not have a deal.
The Twitch thing?
Yes.
Oh, it never happened.
It never, but like, it was like, hey, so they put manpower, and then like the production team digitally was stretched way too thin. Shout out to Noah, who I know is here. Stretched way too thin. And then we had people who knew it, whether it be you or him or talent that knew Twitch. I had an idea of it, and I was like, cool, we just need to work it in a little bit more, less glossy. Nope. And then like, let's get a Twitch person on board, and they can only offer so much manpower up. And we go to do this show, and it was like, well, we got to fix this. And there was a tape trader show that was then there was another show. What was another? Might have been with something with me and RJ. RJ was going to do, you sat on that pilot? Oh,
we piloted like 4 episodes with RJ, and it was awesome. And like, so I got to work with him a lot, and he is just one of the funniest people I've ever met. And thank God, he's getting to do some stuff in AEW now. He's on 100 episodes of AEW, and he got the show with Renee now, which, by the way, Renee, someone who WWE would not give the time of day to, we found out after she left that she had been pushing to do a podcast with WWE for a very long time. And so whoever she was talking to never told the podcast team, because we would have loved to work with Renee Paquette. She's awesome. Everyone loves her. And it never even got to the podcast team. That's how broken the processes were.
I did her last 2 shows. Like what I did, she did In Your House watch along with us and then came on the bump for like an exit interview. It was the weirdest thing. Weird. And then that was it. Then she was gone.
Jeez. Okay. I just remembered another little anecdote about how broken this system was. So this was would have been November 2021. And
so a couple months back, Survivor Series in Brooklyn.
Sure. That sounds right.
Because it was the Roman match, and it still drives me nuts to this day how he was booked. And also, COVID came right back around then, and that floor, because there was big upfronts at that show. Because someone I worked with on some other shows had to like be in charge of. They basically hosted a who's who at Brooklyn that night, and like Stephanie had to speak, and Paul had to speak, and Roman had to make an appearance, and like everybody was there, and the floor was flooded on the hard cam side with suits, and I was like, "What the fuck is going on?" It was so weird. Anyway, go ahead. I just remember that November Brooklyn time because it was my first show back on the road in some way, shape, or form. Because we had come back for Texas with Money in the Bank, but that was in Brooklyn, and COVID kicked back up, and then everybody got like sick right after that. Go ahead. Sorry.
So it would have been that June of 2021 that my boss, who I'd worked with since I got hired, she got fired. And I remember because it was on my birthday. I was back home in Kansas, and I got a call, and she's like, I just got fired. And I was like, oh, shit, that sucks. This does not bode well. And so I kind of like had to inherit some of her duties, which, I was never I was the creative guy. I wasn't the business guy. And so it was like, all right, well, hopefully you have someone that's like sitting in the business meetings, because that's not really, I'd like to just make the shows and come up with the ideas. But they started forwarding all the stuff that would come to her to me. So keep in mind, she gets fired mid-June. This would have been November. So for like 5 months, I'm occasionally getting these emails meant for her. I send it to somewhere else in the company. I get an email from the company that did the ad revenue for all the podcasts. And they were like, hey, we heard you're the guy to talk to now that this woman's not here anymore. We have all these checks that have never been cashed that we've been sending you. And it was well in the 5 figures. This was not nothing.
From podcasts?
From the podcast ad revenue. Yeah, from the podcast.
Do you have like a time period of like how they would have generated? Was that months of podcasts? Was it?
They told me the number, and it was, again, like well in the 5 figures. And I was like, that seems not insignificant. And so I'm like emailing bosses and people above me being like, hey, they're wondering if we're ever going to cash these checks. And, yeah, let's look at that. And then like 2 weeks later, that guy would be fired. And I would like check in again and be like, hey, do we want these tens of thousands of dollars? And hang on, we'll check this. And that guy gets fired. And it just wound up, look, this is not my problem. This is not my role. It's like, I have tried to sound the alarms here that there's just money that we made as a company that no one's cashing. And as far as I know, just into the ether. I don't know, whatever.
They hired some people like yourself and your predecessor to that new podcast, but the creative stuff behind podcasts, I did. Oh wow, you just jogged that memory. Right before the pandemic, I talked to someone who left for a couple different companies, including a game channel that came back and then went away.
No, you're talking about, yep.
And I pitched how we got there. Which I think you might have heard. I did the episode with Kofi.
You did the one with Kofi. I heard that.
Oh, and the stupid Wi-Fi went out, and I think it ruined the whole thing. And I pitched basically like, hey, Bruce does this show. It makes a bunch of money. We have all these people. We have all the footage. Let me do the same thing with people who work here. I won't go back. I won't do anything in the last 5 years. I promise. And I had 10 episodes written, done. Let's do Shawn Michaels from Rumble 94 to winning the Mania at WrestleMania 12. Once again, like Bruce did, take a chunk of time and just talk about that. But call it whatever the hell you want. Call it a pod. What was the Conversations? What was that stupid name they gave it? It wasn't podcast. It was something Conversations. It was like they gave it a name because they put like Drew's Drew and A on
Drew
there.
and A,
They put
Drew and A,
Alexa's
yeah.
on there, but they called it something. Like
Oh
New
yeah,
Day
they brought
got
Swerve Show in for a little bit.
they brought Swerve Show in
and
for a
they put
minute.
it on the network, yeah.
And Sam Thing was on there, and I was the
Yep.
guy in the corner. But they called it like something They gave it a stupid name as opposed to like, hey, here's our podcast.
Yeah, it was like a header on the network at the time, or it might have been
Right.
Peacock at the time. Which, by the way, the Peacock thing we didn't even talk about. Remember coming in one day and being like, by the way, the network's dead, everything's on Peacock. And it's like us and all of our bosses weren't. It's like, what? That changes the entire business and no one.
And they had gotten the network to a good spot because I remember using it to research. And I was like, this is perfect. I have to do Sheamus's run from, I had a whole episode of Sheamus ECW to beating Cena. Mm-hmm. And I was just watching. I had like his cage match up, and I was like, okay, he's on this. Let's just. I had notes for every single, and I could just go on the network and go, okay, let's move over to the next one. The next.
Mm-hmm. Easy to find out where in the show that match is.
Easy to find all that. Oh, right, because they and then Peacock does like season 1 of WrestleMania, which worked out so well. But they did all that.
17 of Raw is a classic.
Oh, it's what a year that was. Season 17, as everybody remembers. But I remember like I pitched this like how we got there show, and I shot it with Kofi. And the idea was he would understand, but like we showed him like his dark match with Steve Corino. Mm-hmm. Never been, and let him talk about that. He told a story about how Big Show is kind of responsible for his chest being how it is.
Right.
And like just little fun, and he would go, hey, oh yeah, I did that. Like he had a great story about tagging with Mickey J, like stuff you wouldn't. And it meant we talked about the entire Randy storyline, and he talked about the stupid, like, and it. I was like, this is a winner, and it went an hour, and I had to say like, well, it should only be 90 minutes, and I was like, no, it could be long. People on this kind of show will pick it up later, and I had to hammer that like, no, it should be 60 to 90, and I was like. Or it could be longer because it's a wrestling podcast and we can get more out of it. And Kofi had some internet issues. Kofi was like the designated pilot guy because I know he also did the bump pilot before I even worked there. But I had an episode with The Miz. I was like, no one's ever talked to The Miz. And I had like a Mysterio episode of ECW to WCW. Like totally, I was like, I'm not talking about Attitude Era at all. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to. But then you guys ended up piloting. It was Gargano and Cole were going to host, and then it was supposed to maybe be like a rotating two.
It was Stokely and Dakota because I wanted to take because the company was so obsessed with Attitude Era stuff. They always wanted to put Attitude Era stuff, which I get it, Boom Period and everything. We all loved it. But like they were always putting that over the current stars. I mean, I remember how many, it's Triple H Appreciation Week, so we all need to do episodes about Triple H.
Hey, it's DX16, DX19, DX22, DX24.
Yeah. Okay, it's 316 day. It's like everything was just like that WrestleMania in Dallas 32. Where remember the New Day was super hot, and then their whole thing was just like, well, we're gonna feed them to Austin, Shawn, and Foley. That was just like the company at the time. So I was like, all right, they're obsessed with the Attitude Era stuff. They're gonna hammer on this. So how do I make that interesting? It's like, well, why don't I take these NXT guys that like were kids watching this and maybe inspired them to go into this as a career, and these guys know each other, and it's going to be good, fun conversations. And it was. And like I mentioned earlier, it's like, it's they wanted Lawler, and it's like, you don't get it. Like that is what would make it a good podcast, is the rapport and the genuine friendship and passion, not this guy cashing his 10,000 check for the company that's going to make for a bad podcast.
Half-ass it and whatever, go for it. He could do that at that point in time. Like that, I got that. But no, you had 4 fans. You had people. There's a lot of fans in that. I always thought, like, I always wanted to do more with Drew because he is such a big. I was like, there's a lot there. Yep. And also for 4 people like that, 2 guys who are on their way up in Cole and Gargano, and then Dakota, who hadn't got a lot of chances to speak in NXT and has now obviously blossomed to a big star and people love her. I had her on the Twitch show I was doing there, and she, like, I think we got 5 times the audience, and I had a couple people go like, well, next time we do that, we should simulcast it. And I was like, or just listen to me the first time around when I'm telling you that if we got talent on these shows that get to have fun, you wouldn't have to adjust after the fact. And we had, and then Stokely is one of the funniest guys in the world, and you just have to set him up. And they, like, I remember seeing that, and it's like he had funny jokes about things, and Dakota had things, and and everybody was a big fan. So if you're gonna like magnify once again the Attitude Era, how about bringing it in from a different angle, where people are not talking about the same 4 or 5 things? It's Stokely would have a joke about D'Lo Brown of the Nation or Godfather, and he's like, "Oh, Godfather is my God," stuff like that, like right there. And now I feel like that's, they're running an angle with Brooks Jensen in NXT right now where he's holding a sign that says, Brett books better. So I'm like, what? How meta is this? But they're willing to go there now. It's complete opposite side of it.
But back then they were the masters. They did the opposite. They turned chicken salad into chicken shit, where it's like one of the things I was pushing forever is the most layup thing in the world. So I've known Xavier Woods, Austin Creed since 2011, I want to say. Been good friends with Woods.
Right.
I brought him on the Giant Bomb E3 shows every year, and he's incredible. And so I was like, okay, well, we're going to do an Up, Down, Down podcast. It'll be me and Woods, Adam Cole, Dakota Kai. So it's like then you got the video game veteran or whatever, podcaster, and then these three talents that love video games. It's a no-brainer. And I forgot why, but by the time we did a pilot, it was just me and Woods. It's around the time that the first Final Fantasy VII remake came out. I remember that was one of the big talking points. And we just, we're friends and we both love video games. And of course it worked. We both know our shit. We had the rapport and everything. And then we piloted it. And then it goes to, again, I think it was like Endeavor Audio or something was who we were working with at the time. And they were the podcast experts who would fly in these marketing people from Beverly Hills to explaining to me that we're going to help you find some ways that'll make a gaming podcast acceptable to podcast audiences. And I'm just sitting there just chewing, like, you motherfuckers, you have no idea. You don't know what you're talking about. And I have done this so much. And you know what they wanted to do? They didn't want it to be me, Woods, Cole, and Dakota. They wanted it to be me and Ronda Rousey hosting a video game podcast because they Googled her name and saw that she brought up Pokemon.
She does like video games. Cool.
I know she does.
And she would have been terrible on the podcast.
I know. I did a pre-interview with her for After the Bell. There's no rapport there. I'm not going to go on and just be shooting the shit with Ronda and having great video game conversations. But you put me in there with, hell, I was just on a video game podcast with Adam Cole a couple weeks ago. I was on the AEW Games podcast with him and Uno, and it was fantastic.
Because they love it. And you're going to find the audience with that. That stuff happened. I know it still happens with Up, Down, Down. Well, they're not going to draw any numbers or whatever. We got to get Cody in there. Or just keep doing what you're doing and make stars of new people, because that's what that was supposed to be. Trust Xavier Woods should be the mission statement of that company.
Yes, he understands everything that you don't. Just if he says something, trust him even if you don't understand it.
All right,
but we don't have a lot of entertainment relations being no, we got to bring in these NFL players or the host of this podcast that no one's heard of that's on our network. Or it's
if they were fans, it worked. If they weren't,
right.
It didn't cross over. I can't tell how many bump episodes this guy's a big TikToker in Mexico. Does he know any wrestling? No. Yeah. Does he? Is he gonna? What was his name? Juan Pa. Nice kid. All that stuff. Didn't even promote being on the bump.
Yeah.
Okay. And we got nobody out of that. Here's Ken Jeong, tremendous. Talked Bobby Heenan with him for 10 minutes before he was on. Joel McHale, fun. But it didn't, unless they cared about wrestling. The Property Brothers were on. They were funny as hell. They got it. They gave us a pro. Oh, our finisher. I always used to, I had those celebrity questions. Okay, so if you were a wrestler, because this was you don't know shit about wrestling, what would you? Oh, our finisher would be the open concept. Bang, that's good shit. Keegan-Michael Key came on and cuts a promo that they used in the sizzle reel probably as of 3 weeks ago. But it was very few and far between when that would click. We had Hiram Garcia on. He was Rock's right-hand man, or I think it was Danny Garcia. And I was like, cool, and no one knows who he is. You didn't get us The Rock. You didn't get us Danny Garcia. You didn't even get us Abe. You got this guy because he works with The Rock. I was like, cool, what are we supposed to do with that?
I mean, the worst thing I was even remotely a part of the whole time I was there was it was around the time AOC did a Twitch stream and it set Twitch records. And the head of digital at the time was like, we got to get on this. But of course, it was months late and everything. And then they heard that I was a gaming guy or whatever. And they asked me what I thought. And they said, we want to do an Among Us tournament. Everyone loves Among Us. Everyone's talking about it right now. I was like, well, first of all, they got on several months after it was the big thing. And also, what
was that thing called? The Gamer Championship Series?
It was supposed to be the Superstar Gaming Series. Yes. They brought in two of my friends, Greg Miller and Xavier Woods, to do their best hosting it. But I was I told them all the reasons it wouldn't work. I said, like, first of all, you can't have an Among Us tournament. I tried to explain how the game works, and it's like a social thing, and you're talking things through as a team. It's kind of a co-op, deception game thing. And so I put together like an alternative thing because they really wanted to use that 2K Battlegrounds game as an esport that came out. And I played that. They brought me in to play it before it came out, and I played it, and I was like, yeah, this ain't going to be an esport. I had to explain to them the concept of a skill ceiling and why Rainbow Six Siege or Dota works, but this game will not. They're like, well, no, we got to do a tournament for this. And it was like the game had been out for like 6 months or something. No one was playing it. So they want an Among Us tournament, or they want it to be 2K Battlegrounds with celebrities and stuff. And I'm like, none of this is going to work. And so by the time I just kept telling them none of this was going to work, they basically just had me on the background on the call watching this. Like, it's like being in a glass box and nobody can hear me, and I'm just screaming, and like no one can. I'm helpless to stop this train wreck. And it took like 4 to 6 hours or something insane. The talent is getting pissed off. AJ had to leave at some point because he's like, I thought this was going to be like an hour or two, and my kids need to eat dinner. AJ leaves.
See ya.
We had our celebrities were like these like Lele Pons, this Instagram model who was not into wrestling or video games, and also the whole setup for the game thing didn't work. And Rhonda was on there, and at one point she thought her controller wasn't work, so half of her thing is turning the controller upside down and just swatting it with her hands.
Yeah.
Are you guys playing for me? And it's like, I'm just watching this all. I can't even like hop in and try to fix anything. I was like removed from it because I kept telling them all the reasons it wouldn't work, and they didn't want to hear it. So I basically got taken off that, and it was a nightmare.
Absolutely.
It was supposed to be a whole series and all this stuff, and it's just like, at a certain point, how many times can you tell people things that and are bad ideas or good ideas, and them not listening to you? And eventually I was like, fuck it, I'm out of here.
I remember sitting in the office. I'm like, I saw you, and I was like, oh, I know why he's here, because I hadn't seen you. And then I was like, hi, why are you here? He's like, I just gave my 2 weeks. I'm going back to Giant Bomb. I was like, hell of a job, Dan. We should have done way more stuff together, but I'm glad you're doing that. And obviously you're there now, and this is good. Now, I don't want to run this into Raw because I know people want to go watch that, and I get that.
Oh, sure.
I do want to ask you about I'll just do this because I'm going to ask my question at the end, because I just got a text from somebody, and they have a request for you, but I have to wait till we're done.
Okay.
I'm going to send you out on this.
Okay.
The AJ Styles angle from SmackDown. This is the only new stuff we're getting into today, folks. Well, I promise we'll do more Raw and active stuff, but I love having these conversations with people that were in it, and you guys get kind of an inside look at it. AJ does Mark Henry.
Yeah.
Not beat for beat, but it's there. By the way, it was 11 years ago that happened, which made me feel so old. 11 or 12.
I just turned into the knight from the end of Last Crusade. Drinking from the wrong grail. All right.
Because we talked about it on Busted Open yesterday, and it was like, oh yeah, people may have no idea what that is. Like, that could be a whole generation different.
That's retro. Like when I saw the CM Punk retro shirts today.
I saw those too, and I was like, I had the. You know what? So I was at the pay-per-view. It was a Money in the Bank in Philly, because that's a 1 month thing. It's over. Like, Mark has the great angle, and Cena just beats him. That's the night Heyman turns on Punk.
Oh, right. Okay.
Because Punk had come back after losing the Taker and was a babyface, and he had that random match with Jericho in Chicago, and he beat him again. But you could tell there was like something with him and Heyman, and then Heyman turns on him and Brock and all that stuff.
Heyman went to Brock, and that led to the SummerSlam match, right?
Correct, with the Wolverine stuff and all that.
Yep.
Okay, so what did you just your general? What did you like it?
I mean, I liked it in that, like, even if it's like an obvious swerve, if it's pulled off well, it's. I love the Mark Henry thing, and it did almost seem like an homage to it.
It totally was.
I think it kind of made Cody look like an idiot.
Thank you.
Almost like that Sting baby face of like,
Sting. Oh, it's exactly what I said yesterday, Dan. Thank you so much. I was like, why is Cody being Sting? Why is he dumb baby face Sting again? He got Logan Paul to outsmart him and not put title for title up, and he just went with it. And now he gets outsmarted by AJ when it's like, Cody, you grew up in the business. How do you not see this? You're not that naive.
Yeah, and I thought it also telegraphed the swerve so much, where it's like, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Mark Henry was doing his thing and Cena was the champ, and they kind of played it as like, hey, the champ's coming out to give him his flowers, and like, hey man, you're a legend, you're the champ here. Like, I think AJ saying, come out here, Cody, he's like, well, okay, he's gonna eat a bunch of shit.
Well, of course, Mark Henry, and he still does this from time to time with his son, which is very lovely. That day, he tweeted like Magic Johnson and LeBron and like any celebrity. He was just like, hey, tune in to Raw tonight. Got a big announcement. And I was just like, what the hell is he doing? Because remember, like a couple months prior, he beat Ryback at Mania. And then Ryback beats up Cena the next night, whatever. I know I'm a little off, but it's around that time. He just pops back up, and you're like, all right, good for Mark Henry, nice. And, he does the whole thing and a lot left in the tank. And great. So they did it, and I was like, all right. For the execution, it was really well done. I liked that Anderson and Gallows held off everybody. I liked that they did a big, impactful move. God, I would love if Cody sold and wasn't on TV this week, and I don't know if that's going to happen, and you could easily put him on the dark match. But at least it was that. Now, my problem with it is Cody's first 3 matches after winning the title are AJ Styles, Logan Paul, AJ Styles. And AJ just turned 47, and age is this number, but you don't have a heel factory ready to go for Cody Rhodes? You knew this was coming. If all the stories are true and half of them are BS, you knew for a year this was coming. All I can think of is they're just waiting on Randy for SummerSlam, as they should, and we need a Randy heel turn. But come on.
Well, I could see, the outcome is obvious. They're not going to end this,
the outcome is obvious
storyline and build up on this thing. But is this going to be Money in the Bank?
I would think. Well, that's what I was trying to figure out. Do you injure him badly enough that they don't do it at Clash? Because the Clash is Drew's night. There's no doubt about it. The Clash should be about Drew main eventing. So either knocks Cody off, which I don't know how much he's been advertised, and I would assume, or do you get Cody in a 6-man, and he's got to go find partners? And do you put Randy on it? Jimmy Cordero said to me on Twitter yesterday, well, I would put KO and Randy with him. I said, well, unfortunately, they have stuck KO with that crappy B-team bloodline, even though his mission was accomplished. Now, Randy with Cody, maybe they did 2-on-3. Maybe they go there and... Cody gets Randy close to him, and Randy goes, you should have let me get that close. Like, he helps them get over age, and then a much-needed Randy turn happens ahead of a Cody match.
That to me feels like the SummerSlam match. I could see the logic internally being like, wow, Cody and AJ got this great match and great reaction in front of this overseas crowd. Let's bring that to Clash of the Castle, see if we can get Magic twice. More meat on the bone, basically. And it was a good match, but yeah, it's just like when the outcome is so obvious, it does kind of
tough. It's tough anyway.
Yeah.
Fawful says Cody, Randy, and Ted DiBiase Jr.
It's about time.
Oh wait,
put
that one up there from Hollywood Blondes for version 4, please. People on the feds Twitch stream saying they miss you. They're on right now, aren't they?
Well, we're kind of programming, brother.
Shout out to my buddy Ryan Popola. Go watch his Twitch when you're done with this. He's trying to watch Raw. He's a nice guy. Just go watch with him. I know he's not the howdy guy or whatever, but go watch his program. All right, one more thing, though. AEW does this casino gauntlet last Wednesday, right? And Will Ospreay wins it. And it's a surprise because we all think, well, we're going to get Ospreay and Swerve and Wembley. And sometimes predictable is an okay thing. And instead I went, oh, wow, okay, cool. They get a month to build this up. I'll wait and see. And then Roderick Strong goes out there after he loses to Will and loses his title at Double or Nothing. He beats Leo Rush, who just came back. And he storms backstage. He sees Christopher Daniels, and he sees Tony, and he makes some neck strong jokes. And apparently that connects with Tony. He's like, I want a title match. I was supposed to be in the Battle Royal. My number didn't get called in time, which I guess is part of it, but they didn't explain the rules very well.
And also, really should have. Many other people, too, would have been there because they're supposed to be 21, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And Tony's like, you know what? That's a great idea. And we'll do it on Wednesday in Colorado. And I'm going like, did you just kill the gimmick of the Battle Royal by saying if you didn't get in, you can get it? And he lost at the pay-per-view to the guy who is getting the title shot.
But also killed the gimmick of you're trying to have Chris Daniels be the voice of Tony.
Walked right by him.
Undervaluing the whole the attack on Tony a few weeks ago, which he's just back at the go position again. You leave something on the table where it's like if you want to tell that story, Roddy's a heel. Have Roddy go to the other guys that are the slimy EVPs that can book things however they want to.
Christian cut the line because the Bucks put him there. I had no problem with that.
Right. Yeah, it's like I wanted to be in on this Tony attack angle. I was like, okay, maybe we can do some interesting stuff with this. But Tony sold it for the draft and everything, which was great. And then he's back so quick. The Anarchy in the Arena match was like, those matches are always, kind of a fun watch, but like,
other than not selling fire, Dan, they didn't sell fire.
They didn't sell fire. There felt like there were no real stakes to it. The team AEW seemed kind of thrown together. And then you've got stuff now where it's like Tony's just there and making weird decisions, and Chris Daniels, like, it's just, there's a lot of logic gaps here. And I think I was hoping they would do a better long-term angle with this, because like they have shown in the past, AEW, look at like the whole Hangman arc. It was great long-term storytelling, and it paid off and everything. He won the title, and they've been capable of it. But then week to week, it's like with this being such a big main event angle and everything, how is this look, I'm not watching wrestling expecting it to be cinema, as much as people love to use that term in the last couple of years. But like, just let me suspend my disbelief. Let it at least make logical sense, and the way that silly wrestling storylines can make sense. I'm looking at this stuff and I'm like, why was it booked this way? Like, I think Tony needs people in that company that are willing to tell him when an idea is bad.
QC.
And like,
they need a QC person.
They do. And it's like, I know they don't have like a traditional like writer's room the way WWE has for a long time, but WWE had another problem with that, where they had a team of writers, but Vince just wouldn't listen to them. So that's another one. So eventually you're just getting Vince's shitty ideas anyway. So yeah, now like Tony doesn't have that writer's room. I don't know how much the agents and the veterans that are in that locker room
they're working TV matches, Dan. That's the problem. The office is in matches, and that is a problem in itself. I will give you one simple thing they could have done that would have made this make sense. Swerve cuts the promo at the end of the show, which I believe is the first or second time he has closed the show as the world champion. That hasn't happened nearly enough. What if Tony says, no, you didn't get in because that's the rules, and then at the end of the show, Swerve goes, you know what? I'm a fighting champion.
Yeah,
I'd love to put down Roderick Strong. I will face him, and I'll do it this Wednesday. Now, there's your babyface saying, bring him on. And then Tony goes, you know what? If the champ wants it, I'll make the match. Now you've gotten over Roddy not having a logical, and I've seen people go, it was win-loss record. I don't care. He lost at Double or Nothing. He wasn't in the number one contender match. That is just very basic. If Swerve got to be the one to accept the challenge, it makes him that much more important.
Yeah, it's a confident, cool babyface champ thing to do. Like
absolutely.
That,
like Cody would.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I don't. It is very frustrating because, like, I root for both companies as much as people love to do this tribalism stuff and this or that. Like, no, I want both companies to succeed. I want it to be a great place where people can get paid and work and be on TV and things like that. But the long-term storytelling stuff with this elite angle, I think, like, look at their other main event thing they tried before this with the devil angle. Like, even like, I know that was plagued by injury.
Snake bit by injury too, but yes.
But even if that had panned out, I remember I was at a Dynamite here in Minneapolis when they were doing the thing where it's like, oh, the devil thing shows up on the screen, says some cryptic stuff, and then, Smojo turns. Or like, I don't know, like none of that stuff was working even when people were healthy. So
it was a mess anyway.
It was the bad part of Attitude Era storyline stuff. Like, just I don't know. There's a lot of things like that frustrate me where it's like, yeah, okay, the lights out gimmick worked for Taker in the Attitude Era and beyond. Like, you can't have every vaguely spooky character just do the lights without it's not the Taker thing. It's not the lights, the gong, the build up.
It's Sabu. It's Sabu and ECW stuff.
Yeah, just someone turning off the lights, turning on, like, which can still work. It worked in ECW, but like when you do it 4 times a show and it's always just like, all right, Julia Hart's standing there now, it's like it loses the impact. So
it's like Ray Phoenix doing Will Ospreay's move he doesn't want to do anymore.
Oh, right. Yes.
Why are there agents? What's the point? And once again, I will say this, like, and I typically enjoy watching their show more because it's not glossy and it is different. Same. Maybe because I was in the machine for 5 years and I want to see something, but like, there's things I love, like I can't wait for Chad Gable. I hope that's the best story going on right now. There's stuff, I don't care about Liv Morgan as a world champ. That's just me. I thought everything they did last week didn't matter. I think Drew is carrying Raw other than Chad Gable. And they started the show last week with 3 heels, which was an odd thing to do. Yeah. Where's Gunther? I'm glad he's using the crown as a trophy and not on his head. Like some of that stuff. Yes, not. And I knew that. Some of that stuff's working. SmackDown is not a great show right now. And I saw, they did 2.3 million and 0.65. There's not a lot of stuff to sink your teeth into right now on Friday Night SmackDown.
We are very much in that post-Mania lull where like I'm always hoping for something like, I feel like there have been interesting things that have come out of this period in the past. I feel like the initial pipe bomb, that was, 2011, the Nexus angle. I feel like there is that lull where it's like, all right, we're kind of in this no man's land between Mania and SummerSlam. Let's throw some shit at the wall and see if it works. And like, I would kind of like that. And like, this regime definitely seems more open to doing some more off the beaten path type stuff. I would like to see something bolder. It does feel like we're just kind of like treading water until Mania right now.
Yeah, or SummerSlam, all that stuff. And I get that. Please subscribe at thewrestlingmatchshow.com because we want to have Dan back to try some of these ideas out. Now, Dan, we have to go because Raw's starting. But I did get a text from my fiance. She would like you to come to our wedding.
Whoa.
It's in October. She knows we're friends. Okay. I will make sure an invite gets. She just said, "Do you have to do this live, or you can't come back upstairs?" So I'm throwing it out there. Some people that are going to this wedding.
Okay.
There's an AEW person or two. You probably can figure out who it is who's invited. There's a handful of WWE people. One of which you will see.
East Coast.
It will be in Connecticut. So I realize you have a bit of travel, but I'm giving you some time. But she said you have to invite him live on the air. So you don't have to come. I'm not telling you that, but I'm making sure you're...
Schedule permitting, I certainly would. I would love to. I'd be honored.
Folks, I'm not giving away invites. Don't think it's going to happen, but that's a first here on the show. Dan, it has been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing those stories, and being a good friend. I always like doing stuff with you, and hopefully we can have you back to do more stuff in the future.
Matt, one of the regrets I have from my time in WWE is that you and I did not get to work together more because we've had plenty of times where we've chatted about wrestling, and it's always a good time. So, yeah, you say the word. I'd love to chat more.
Thank you very much, sir. Dan Ryckert, thank you. And thank you, everybody. This is, I think, our longest episode so far. Please subscribe at thewrestlingmatchshow.com. We hit that 1,000 number. We unlock a lot more content. Matt Cardona will be joining us this week, so stay tuned on our social media at WrestlingMatt23. Rob, yes, Todd Pittengill is awaiting his invite, but he's always right here with us at all times. Hopefully we make that happen soon. But for everybody behind the scenes, thank you for waiting today a little bit longer. I appreciate that. Dan, thanks to you. And everybody, in the great words of Tin Naki, as we like to paraphrase, we'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. We'll be talking about wrestling even more. See you then.